Hey everyone, what's up? What's going on? My name's Joe, and before we get started with the show today, I have just a few quick announcements regarding the podcast. First up, we have a live show coming up at the 6th Annual Philadelphia Podcast Festival. You can be a part of our live audience on Sunday, June 24th at FIT, or the Philadelphia Improv Theater at 4 p.m. Tickets are $10 and now available at phillypodfest.com. Also, at the same festival, the next weekend, previous guest Ross Wiseman's Kid Flicks podcast will be live Saturday, June 30th at Tattooed Mom in Philadelphia at 1 p.m. I, Joe, will be a guest on that show, so stop by. It's free. And as always, join our Facebook discussion group, How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the Facebook group, and buy our merch at howmanyfingerspodcast.bigcartel.com. And without further ado, here's our review of Action Point. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week, we're reviewing Action Point.
Audiences should make it an action point not to see this movie.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting pituitary tangled and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
Thank you for that, Sean Mason. He left that for us on Facebook.
And Sean Mason, of course, former guest of the podcast on the Wonder Woman episode, so go check that out for sure. And we're going to check out the... Oh, I have the can turned around. Sequench Ale Session Sour from Dogfish Head Brewery. A 4.9% alcohol by volume beer that is blissfully brewed with lime juice, lime peel, black limes, and that's a lot of lime, and sea salt.
Oh yeah, it's a nice
Is it limey?
It's like a really good summer beer.
Have you had this before?
Yeah, I think I brought this to the Memorial Day party we went to a year ago or whatever. This one, me and Savory really liked this when we first started drinking it. It's good outside sunny day beer. I don't know how I feel about it now. It's kind of cold and chilly in here. Drinking it.
I'm not a big sour beer guy. I like session beers a lot,
right?
But the sour beer is not. I never really like sour candy or.
Mm-hmm. Sour can be sour beers can be hit or miss for me.
Yeah.
I'm generally a fan of just sour flavor, but yeah.
I need sour that turns in. I loved Airheads.
Mm-hmm.
Warheads.
Warheads, yes. Warheads
because it was the. Well, I guess the Sour Patch Kids are also.
See,
first they're sour, then they're sweet. But with Warheads, it was like a challenge to get to the sweet flavor of the Warhead, and that made you be like, all right, well, I'm working towards something with the sour flavor. But with this, it's just sour the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know. I like this sour a little better than a Goes or whatever else we're having. But yeah.
I'm also not a huge citrus guy, obviously because of sour, but I hate when recipes use too much lime or stuff on them, or I don't like lemon chicken or stuff like that.
Right. Acidic can provide a nice flavor to balance it out.
Shit ton of heartburn.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, we're reviewing Action Point this week. Mm-hmm. Joe, you want to give me that IMDb description? I will jump into my mic notes and keep a close eye on my Domino's tracker because we ordered pizza and they're going to arrive during this episode.
So IMDb will have you believe a daredevil designs and operates his own theme park with his friends. Not really, but okay. I guess so. Yeah,
I guess. Friends part, or
wait, is he a daredevil? I mean, I guess he's a daredevil because he's doing nothing. I don't know.
He is kind of. I mean, he's fucking around with stuff. He's kind of just Johnny Knoxville running an amusement park. It's short, so I'll appreciate it for that. But Action Point was directed by Tim Kirkby, who's mostly done TV. He's delected and directed a bunch of Veep, Brockmire, Fleabag, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Man-Seeking Woman, and many, many more. I mean, pretty much mostly TV for most of his career. And Action Point was written by John Altshuler and Dave Krinsky. They've worked together, mostly together before. They both created Silicon Valley along with Mike Judge. I think Mike Judge is the one who gets the actual, it's created by Mike Judge, but they were creators of the series. They also created Lopez, which I'm assuming is the George Lopez vehicle.
Yes.
And they also wrote for King of the Hill, Beavis and Butthead, and a few other Mike Judge projects and their own projects. And then I think the only thing that I could see feature film wise that they did solo was Blades of Glory. They wrote the screenplay for that. So kind of here and there. I mean, they've been on some great projects, and it doesn't seem like they've done a whole lot too great on their own. In terms of the production, it's loosely based on Action Park, which is a water theme park in Vernon, New Jersey, which closed in 1996 after numerous lawsuits and injuries, including 6 deaths. Not featured in this movie.
That kind of would have been interesting. Yeah.
I'll read some stuff from my mom, who actually used to go to Action Park in Vernon. But like some of the rides in this were based on real rides, like the Cannonball Loop and the Alpine Slide were very real rides. And those are actually like featured in the movie. Like they show him creating the idea for the Cannonball Slide. I think the Alpine Slide is the one that they're on, like the sort of skateboard luge things going down. Anyway, it was opened under new ownership as Mountain Creek Water Park, and then it went back to being Action Park for a little bit after that. Like they tried to rebrand in like 2014, but there was too many people that were just like, I knew people that died at this park, so we're not going there. And then I think now it's back to being Mountain Creek Water Park again. I
feel like I would have loved a documentary on this.
We'll get into it, but part of my disappointment with this movie has to do with the fact that they didn't actually just make a movie about Action Park. They were inspired, and we're just kind of like, wouldn't it be cool to make a movie where the jackass guys run like a theme park? But like the story of Action Park is just kind of interesting in and of itself, just in terms of it being this like local legend where like, let me pull up the text from my mom, because I remember her always telling me about.
Did you do enough research to know like if like he actually lived in like a fucking saloon or whatever, had problems with bears?
I don't think. Like I think that stuff is fabric. Like I don't think the creators were like characters themselves. But just the fact like Action Park was this theme park that like was notoriously dangerous, and people died there and had many injuries to the point that it had to close, but they kind of just kept going for a while. And they did kind of have this attitude of like sort of anything goes. It's obviously not as extreme as takes place in this movie, but it was kind of that place. Like
so you live in that area, and so your mom grew up in this area.
Vernon is like probably like half an hour to 40 minutes away from us. But it's still in Sussex County, so we're kind of on like the southwestern edge of like Sussex County, and Vernon would be like the northwestern. Like Vernon's about like as far northwest as you can go without going into like New York and Pennsylvania, and sort of that tip of the state up there in New Jersey. But yeah, it was like a place that my mom and her friends used to sort of frequent. And I texted her asking just share some stories about it, and she says, I know we actually called it Accident Park or Traction Park were like the nicknames for it in high school, because back then so many people got hurt up there. One of my friend's brothers actually died up there. The luge thing that they had, then somehow it threw him off. She's talking about the Alpine Slide that's featured in that. That was obviously a very dangerous ride. And then she also said, my girlfriend was a lifeguard in the cliff diving area, and she quit after a while because city folk who couldn't swim were always diving and nearly drowning in that area.
Wow.
So it was just like a really like dangerous part. It's been a part of like Sussex County like lore for a while. I was looking up, coincidentally enough, Chris Gethard, when he used to write for Weird New Jersey, wrote a lot. Like it's something that showed up in like Weird New Jersey, just because it's a weird fucking place. It's like a theme park that like I don't think it had as many not rules as are shown in like this movie.
Right.
But it was just an unsafe place, and they didn't really like do things like people would die, and they would just kind of be like, oh well,
Right. Yeah.
we'll just kind of keep opening up the park and trying to stretch it out as far as we can. To the point that like when they reopened as Mountain Creek, like I remember going to Mountain Creek one year, and my parents being like very cautious about it and being like, are you sure you have to go to like the water park? And like, even though it was new ownership, like it still just had such a reputation in the county for being this place that people just literally died at. And I think it's why a lot of people in my area also don't really trust theme parks.
Right. Yeah.
Because of that. But it did have people that really loved it and, you know, liked going there because of that atmosphere. So because of that, I was really excited to review this movie because I thought it was going to have more to do with that. Turns out. I also remember hearing somewhere falsely that people thought that they filmed at Mountain Creek Water Park, but they didn't. They filmed everything in South Africa, where they built their own version of the park.
South Africa.
Yeah, so I guess just because it's where they could find open land to build the park for cheap, but they did recreate the Cannonball Loop and the Alpine Slide. So that's about all I have for the notes of this, but I'm disappointed by it not being set in Vernon, being set in, what do they call it, like Calico County or something, California.
Yeah, we talked about that just so we can reiterate the conversation that we had on our live episode. I was geographically confused just because I knew it was based on a place in northern New Jersey. And all of a sudden, there were just like too many contradicting landmarks, kind of, where it was kind of like, oh, his daughter was visiting from New York, and then they were like, oh, the bus was going to Las Vegas, and I was like, well, that's a really long bus ride, like, you know, like,
I mean, it makes sense eventually.
The New York thing kept throwing me off because she was visiting from New York or whatever. So I was like, where was this movie? Like, where was it supposed to be taking place? And then what was your answer? Like, it's Calico.
I don't know if it's a place that they made up for this movie, or if that's I'm not familiar enough with California geography, obviously. But Calico County or Calico or just Calico, California, something like that was what they said. But yeah, so Action Point. I said this in like our group of friends that like my reaction and my review of this is going to be like the most positive meh reaction that I've ever given to something. Like it's a bad movie, and like we'll get into like the Rotten Tomatoes score of this movie. But I kind of feel like it was almost not as I didn't expect it to be horrible going in because I was expecting to be interested based on the action park connection. Then once I realized it wasn't directly imitating that park, then I was disappointed. And then I was kind of, it kind of improved from there, I thought, based on how low my expectations started getting going into it. But make no mistake, it's an awful movie. I just feel like it's getting like trashed sort of beyond what is deserved for the movie. I feel like the movie knows exactly what it is, and I feel like it's maybe just marketed and released poorly. Like my opinion is like this should have been a straight to streaming movie. Because me going to see it with MoviePass, I didn't come out of the theater being like, what a fucking waste of time and money. Like I came out of the theater being like, well, like I'm glad I didn't pay to see that, but I wasn't like bored the entire time. Like,
but if you spent $14 on that shit.
That's what I'm saying. Like if this needed to be like a straight to Netflix movie where like it's part of some subscription package that you've already paid for, you're not shelling out additional money to see it. This seems like a movie I would have watched at like a sleepover in like the like early like 2000s or something like that. Like it feels almost like it's like a American Pie like spin-off movie in a lot of ways. Like maybe like minus like the extreme objectification of women that's in I wrote gratification in my notes, but that's not what the word is. Objectification of women that's in American Pie. There is definitely some of that in that, but that's not sort of the point of this movie. But it is similar.
Actually a surprising not amount of it. I don't know. There's some weird things going on though in this movie that I'm sure we'll get into. But
But just in terms of like being like an American Pie movie, like those are like lowbrow movies, but they're not necessarily like poorly made movies. They know exactly what they're doing, and
The American Pie spin-offs.
or even just the actual American Pie movie.
Oh, I think the actual American Pie are like well-made movies.
Yeah, but even the spin-offs are like, it's not like...
They know what's going on.
It's not a low
right,
budget. I mean, even if it is low budget, they're working well with their budget.
It's like a TV movie, kind
of.
Yeah,
And like the script is
even
not
more,
like awful for those. Like they make sense. There's usually actual character progression in those stories and whatnot.
Right.
And it just their only sort of like flaw, quote unquote, is that like the characters go too far into like zany caricatures. Like, you know, they create these, you know, like, you know, Stifler and, you know, Finch and all these different characters that are, you know, too far into these caricatures. And then the plot is really determined by where can we put these wild scenes / like set pieces, you know. And like that's kind of what this movie is like, well, they're gonna do this crazy thing in this location, or this crazy thing will take place because of this reason. And that's kind of what drives the whole plot of this movie rather than the other way around. But again, like it's not like it's like a plot that doesn't make sense. It's not like it's like characters acting outside of, you know, what would make sense for the characters.
Right.
Like usually the motivations and all that stuff makes sense in those movies, and especially because the characters are so well defined as like caricatures of themselves. So I don't. This felt like that in that way. Like it knew what it was doing, and it didn't do it poorly. It's just, you know, did this concept necessarily need to be done? And there's definitely some mistakes and flaws, but I just want to sort of set the table for like, is this like the worst thing ever? Like, I think there's movies I've seen this year already that are way worse than this, that tried for bigger things and failed much more miserably. This is kind of like a low risk movie, takes very few risks, but also, you know, doesn't really fall flat on its face.
I probably don't like it as much. I don't think it's.
To be very clear, I
don't.
don't.
No, most definitely.
It's a bad movie,
but I don't even think it's on par. I'm kind of shocked. Again, you did the notes, so I'm kind of going blind. Besides seeing the entire movie, I'm going blind of what's going on in the background of this movie, and it's kind of disappointing to see that there are, you know, people that are somehow involved in the industry with like reputable shows and films and everything on the writing, and I didn't realize the directing side. Just because it feels like kind of a movie that a high schooler would make, whereas I think like the American Pie spin-offs are movies that like are made for high schoolers, kind of specifically in mind. This just literally feels like some like dumb fucking high schooler, or like maybe the Jackass crew like thought of themselves. Like what's it called? Who's the secondary character who's actually like in
Chris Pontius?
Yeah, Chris Pontius is just kind of like, it just seems like, why, like he's kind of like this quirky side character, but it almost just seems like an inside joke that we're not in on, where it's kind of like, what if he's in underwear and he's always got like a hatchet on him, man, and like he's also got like a ponytail and he knows like historical history, and like it, like I'm sure in some context somewhere that's funny, but it's just so far out there that you have to be like, who the fuck wrote this?
He's like a low point for this movie. Because I think he's just playing Chris Pontius, like, you know, kind of doing his own jokes. He's just, I'm really annoyed by his vibe in this movie. Like, I think he's my least favorite part of it. He's kind of like a high school class clown who's like 40 plus years old. And like, it's just like, it's not endearing anymore. Like, if that was like an actual kid when you were in high school and he was your classmate, that would be funny then.
Oh, yeah.
But like watching it on screen is not the same type of humor. And it's not really funny when he's like 40 plus years old. Like, it's just kind of creepy. And to sort of get into the plot of the movie, like, it, you know, obviously the stage is set in terms of it's this theme park with like no rules, and it's this kind of just this outlaw place where like anything goes, and you can drink and you can smoke and you can make out and you can, you know, do crazy jumps off of like the rides, you know, and no one really cares. No one's telling you no. And they've got this whole regular group of people that appreciate that and enjoy that. And then, DC, who is the Johnny Knoxville, the owner of the place, his daughter Boogie comes to town to visit for the summer. She lives in New York, and she's got obviously a much more uptight upbringing there in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes, and Chris Pontius like gives some like real weird vibes around Boogie that really hurt his character. Like even if he's not gonna like make me laugh and it's gonna be not endearing the way that he's acting with his like, you know, like skimpy outfits and like weird just zany nature, like he could have at least been kind of like a sweet weird zany uncle character to Boogie.
Yes.
But they completely ruin it right off the bat because like they have the scene where she's unpacking and she like awkwardly like has like the tampons out, and like DC and what is his name in the movie? Chris Pontius. I can't remember his character's name.
The IMDb literally is just blank.
I did see that. Yeah, I didn't put a name in there.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't think enough people cared about this movie to fill out the IMDb properly. The Wikipedia has like 2 sentences for the plot.
Jeez.
But he like they, you know, they're weirded out by it. They're just looking at it, and she kind of like, you know, is like, you know, whatever, guys. It's just a tampon. It's not a big deal. And then like at one point, like I forget how the conversation gets there. It gets to a weird point where he basically gives DC a look that's kind of like a your daughter's getting hot and I'm gonna like fuck her kind of look. Like I'm not crazy in reading into that, right? Like that was
the minute that she walks into the house. I think Johnny Knoxville is, or when she's getting off like the bus or the airplane, Johnny Knoxville. Again, the direction in this movie is so strange or poorly acted. Johnny Knoxville like walks up to a little girl and gives her like the big pink stuffed animal bunny he was going to give Boogie or whatever. I don't know. Just there's some things in this movie where I'm like, is this a TV movie from the 80s or something? Like
they are trying to get across the idea that like girls grow up too fast and
right,
whatnot.
No,
and like
but then so that's his reaction, and then Chris Pontius's reaction is he almost doesn't recognize her too as well, because you know over the past year or whatever she's developed or whatever, and he's like, whoa, that's so beautiful that you're blossoming into a, like, you know, and it was just like,
it's creepy
yikes.
language. But then literally when they're in the room that they like look at the tampons in, he gives DC a look. It's like the look you would like high schoolers would give their friend if like their sister walked down. It's like, dude, your sister's hot now.
Right, yeah.
But it's about like his daughter, and like so like it that's like fucked up. But then like she's 13 in the movie, so that's really fucked up. And then it's like, then we're supposed to like look at Chris Pontius's character as this like endearing uncle who's like giving advice to like his like niece Boogie like later in the movie. Like it completely taints our view of him for the rest of it. Like you can't make that joke. Because she's 13, like the joke's out. It's off the table. There's no room for that joke here. And then B, you can't make that joke if you want us to look at Chris Pontius's character in like a good light. Like if he wants to be the creepy fucking pervy like skeevy dude, then like sure, he can make that joke and we're gonna villainize him for the rest of the movie. But I can't get on board with anything with Chris Pontius after that moment in the movie. It's a weird choice. It's like that. I do agree with your point about it maybe being a movie that a high schooler could have written, because that's like high school sense of humor. Like
it is.
That's like a joke that like dudes make to other dudes, where it's like, dude, when you have like a daughter, like you better watch out because like I'm gonna like fuck her, which is like really gross humor. But like it's something that everyone made a joke about in like high school, and like it's another thing to like put that in a movie in 2018, like as 40-year-old men making a movie. It's
a very uncomfortable, just like I was talking about, there's some like very weird bass layer tone stuff going on in this movie where it's a strange transition from like a bunch of dudes like hanging out, and if you take your dick out, like it makes the cut in Jackass, because like, oh dude, I can't believe he took his dick out and he put it on my forehead while I was sleeping. And now you have like this
it's a Jackass movie with a 13-year-old girl.
You have this kind of like demented Full House setup where like John Stamos isn't walking around in like a barely, you know, constructed thong where you can see like the outline of his penis like in front of the Olsen twins. Like, you know, it's like, it was like, I was like, I can't, like, this is too much. Like, it's like they kind of don't know what they're doing, and like to watch it is like, oh no, this is like, you're mixing two genres that kind of can't be mixed, kind of. And that's why I was like, Oh, even there's just like weird tones that I got too from the kind of narrative device that they use, where for some reason Johnny Knoxville in the future is narrating from like bad grandpa makeup and the.
Oh, we're gonna pause. The pizza's here.
Yeah.
And we're back. I had to go accept some pizza from Patrick. Thank you, Patrick from Domino's, for your service. So we were talking about Bad Grandpa.
Yeah.
Is that actually the Bad Grandpa character, or is it just Johnny Knoxville in other old man makeup? I don't know Bad Grandpa well enough to know if that's...
I don't know it either. I wish I knew it well enough to... I think it might just be like, hey, wasn't that funny when I was in old man makeup in the last movie I made and I got kicked in the nuts, you know? And they're like, yeah, let's do it again. And he was like, all right, this is funny. And I
was reading a review that was like, Johnny Knoxville's kind of more handsome in the Bad Grandpa makeup than he is as just like the beat down real life version of himself that he is as DC, where like he is actually like getting old and he almost looks older with like the bags under his eyes.
Yeah.
These fucking bugs. This is really great for the audio guys, but the video people are getting a treat.
But it was just like I think the point that I was making before we left, it was just I hated that narrative device where he's telling like his daughter's daughter, so his granddaughter, about Action Point, and that never really adds up to anything really. And also it's just in the trailers it shows a lot of that, like he's an old man and he's hurting himself, and like the daughter and the granddaughter's like has this like weird kind of like laugh where she's like and I'm like, this is weird, this is making me feel uncomfortable kind of. I don't know like why this like little girl is like getting off on seeing him like keep hurting himself, and like it just kind of, I don't know where it stems from, but something made me feel like uncomfortable about it. It was just weird. It was weird.
I didn't get the uncomfortable reaction. I did think it was kind of sweet in idea and not really in execution.
Yes.
Like I feel like there is a better version of this movie that involves the older version of DC, you know, telling this girl about, you know, the good old days and, you know, Action Park and whatnot, or Action Point rather. But I think the execution in terms of like with like Bad Grandpa, like the actual Bad Grandpa, the joke was that like he looked like this typical old guy who's wearing like these, you know, nice clothes and like a sweatshirt and like a, you know, collared shirt underneath it and Dockers and whatnot. But he's actually like a vulgar asshole prankster who's like, you know, cursing at people and, you know, rubbing his nuts all the time and, you know, getting hurt and just doing like these pranks that an actual old person couldn't actually do. But then for this character, like it doesn't make sense that he looks and is dressed like Bad Grandpa, because like DC is like this kind of like, in the better version of this movie, it's a better explanation or a better story about DC being just against the man.
Yes.
And like that's what the heart of this movie should be, and they don't really execute that properly. You know, like, you know, his whole thing about having Action Park is like, fuck the man. And there should have been some kind of backstory behind like his divorce that had something to do with like, oh, I was working a 9-to-5 job and I said fuck that and blah blah blah, and you know, your mom wanted me to keep staying there and I said no, I'm gonna go start this park, whatever. Something that had to do with his whole philosophy being anti the man. And I don't think I really care about spoilers in this movie.
No.
So I don't think this is a huge spoiler, but the way, at least in terms of DC's relationship with like Boogie, it hits a rough patch at one point. But then it sort of like turns itself around, and like the turnaround doesn't really have anything to do with like, oh, okay, I'm going to go back and work a 9-to-5 job and start wearing khakis and like, you know, dress shirts and stuff like that. Like, so we don't have any evidence of him turning away from this like anti the man, like fuck everything attitude that he had. So why is he dressing like that as the grandpa? Like, especially if he's still reminiscing about like the glory days. Like, it's like a transition that we never saw happen and there's no explanation for. And like, there could be a sweet version of this movie where like, you know, he is still a grandpa, but like, you know, he's not dressing like your average 90-year-old, like, grandpa, like he's, you know, dressing like just an older version of DC. Like I feel like they could have costumed him much better And like, you know, there could be some humor in like that juxtaposition there, rather than it just being like a vulgar guy, the same joke, you know, kind of from Bad Grandpa, just repeated there.
Right. They're just building a Bad Grandpa universe, cinematic universe. Yeah, it's just, I don't know.
I think why I'm so hesitant to like completely dish on this movie is that I see the potential. And I don't know if that has to do with like maybe, you know, these people who have been very involved in the industry in some great shows like King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead, and, you know, working alongside Mike Judge, who's like one of the greatest minds in like TV comedy or even like film comedy, like,
right.
you know, of our, you know, or I guess, you know, a younger generation than us a little bit. But just very talented people. And then they come out with a movie like this. And I just have to believe like maybe there was a version of this script somewhere that was a little more intelligent, a little more smart and witty and funny. And I wonder, I don't know, I don't think this movie got studioed because I don't think the studio really cared about this movie. But I just wonder if it got maybe like jackassed, like maybe there was a better version of the script and they were like, yeah, but where are the stunts? Like we have to stay the entire movie at the action park so that we can, you know, have a bunch of different shots of people getting hit in the nuts and, you know, doing the stunts and stuff. And like that stuff is still like, I kind of still enjoy that stuff. Like I liked the Jackass movies. Yeah. It is an interesting concept to, you know, to see a fiction version of Jackass that's taking place in a story, but we're still getting some of the crazy stunts, and Johnny Knoxville's still doing his own stunts and stuff like that. But I feel like they just spend too much time at the park. There's more to the story that's not really getting told. Like we don't see Boogie's mom at all in this, and like that seems like that would be a big part if you're taking this story seriously, in terms of like, you know, she's on the other side of the country. DC moved all the way to the West Coast to like basically get away from that, and like the most we get is like, well, when your mom left me and she had her reasons, and we don't really get anything more than that. And like, I don't know, I feel like her staying with Boogie or Boogie staying with DC at this park that's got like no rules, is like an outlaw land, and is like getting featured on the TV for like lawsuits against it and stuff like that. Like, wouldn't that cause like tension with like Boogie's mom? Like at the very least, we should have gotten like a phone call being like, what the hell are you doing with my daughter over there? You know,
I don't want her there. Yeah.
Like the safety should have been a concern when it comes, like that should have been a plot line. Like, you know, this outlaw land seems fun, but then my 13-year-old daughter gets hurt, and, you know, now it's not fun and games anymore. And I don't know how that never came into the script at some point. Like, there's just some stuff that seems like obvious plot lines that never really came to fruition.
Yeah, I don't know. It does feel like it got like it became like a Jackass set where like, you know, you can see like in the outtakes that they play during the credits where like Chris Pontius is just kind of saying lines that he thinks are funny, kind of, where like I can almost just see like, and then I'm sure like maybe Johnny Knoxville kind of does a little of that, and then it kind of like catches on with like the, you know, everybody else who's like kind of working on the film or whatever, and they have these planned stunts, but like everything else is just kind of like, I don't know, what if we just like, I don't know, like Chris Pontius, like again, it felt like it was written by a high schooler. It's like, what if Chris Pontius is just always just chugging like a pharmaceutical like pill bottle? It's like, it doesn't make any sense, and he doesn't really seem to act any different, and there seems to be like no ramifications or anything. Not that I expect like that height of like whatever, but it's just kind of like, it's just funny. It's just kind of like him having a hatchet and kind of just swinging around like willy-nilly kind of. It's just kind of like,
that's his character, yeah.
Yeah, like it's just strange, and it's just kind of like, it looks like they just kind of like maybe went over to South Africa and filmed this and had a good old time. And then,
it looks like it was a lot of fun to make.
Yes, and then they brought it back home and just like kind of fucking tossed it off to some editor, and then maybe he made like a cut of it, and they're like, no man, where's like the crazy stuff?
We did a lot of fun stuff over there.
yeah, it just,
he's like, I guess I can cut this scene with Boogie's mom where like there's this big emotional revelation about why they got divorced.
It just seems,
yeah, that sounds good. Where's the nut shot?
It just seems like they were, I don't know, like maybe intelligent people were involved with this, but they were like cut off at every corner, kind of. It also makes me feel like a little, I don't know whether it's me maturing or it's Johnny Knoxville fucking, like...
Not mature.
Physically, yeah, not maturing mentally, but physically maturing. And I felt concerned every time he got hurt. Like, but not in a jackass way, like, like, those knuckleheads have a death wish, kind of. Like, concern, like, dude,
is this worth, like...
Is this, like, what you still want your career to be? Like, it's just, like... He went to the
emergency room multiple times during the filming of this.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like...
They have that one blooper at the end where he, like, on the Alpine luge, like, falls off and doesn't get up for a long time. And everyone's kind of just like, ugh. And then he gets up and everyone cheers. But they didn't show the ones where he actually hurt stuff and went to the emergency room.
Right. But it's kind of like, I don't know. Like, is this the film that gets made when all of a sudden you don't kind of have the, like, celebrity clout because the jackass days are long over to make movies like the one where he's pretending like he's in the Special Olympics? I can't remember the name.
The Ringer.
Yes. It sounds terrible to say that description out loud. But
it was actually a pretty sweet movie.
It was really nice.
It featured a lot of actually handicapped... That's not the right word. I don't know what the right word is now. Right? Handicapped.
Mentally handicapped?
I don't know. I feel like we're not supposed to say that anymore, and there's a new word, but I don't know what it is.
I don't know either. But and then he was like in the Dukes of Hazzard movie, which I never saw. I don't even know if it did well, but it seems like it was right up his alley. Like, like if he was actually like doing some sort of stunt thing. But
who was the other? Oh, Stifler was the other.
Oh, okay.
Dukes, right? In Dukes of Hazzard?
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was Sean William Scott.
I can't even picture like who was next to him, but I don't know. Like, is this like what it takes to make a movie? Kind of is for him to just get hurt again.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird because he didn't have to get hurt in those movies.
Yeah.
I don't have any like specific plot points. Besides that, the villains kind of seem like Air Bud villains. Like.
Yeah, I thought the villains were kind of poorly handled. Like that's I'll come back to sort of my main complaint where like I feel like there's missed potential in that like this movie could have been like a movie that was about anti the man and like embracing some of the qualities that are good about counterculture, but then maybe coming to a compromise somewhere in the middle at the end. Like I feel like it wants to be Dodgeball in that like this park wants to be Average Joe's.
Yes.
Versus the 7 parks, which like I think is supposed to be
like Six Flags.
Yeah. Versus them being like Lobo Jim and Dodgeball. But it doesn't really make a strong argument for like why is 7 parks the bad guy?
Right.
Because like why is safety at an amusement park like a bad thing? Like, and there are ways like that's a weird topic, and I feel like there are ways that they could have worked around that. Without having to be like, oh, they have seatbelts on their rides. They're fucking losers. Like, you could have had, like, it's in the 70s. So, like, you can have, like, 7 parks, like, frowning on the behavior that people like at Action Point in terms of, like, the way that people can dress. Like, you can have people at, like, 7 parks being, like, hey, I don't know why they didn't have a scene at 7 parks to begin with. Like, that seems crucial. Like, they have the scene where they go break in, but you don't actually interact with any 7 parks employees. They don't go ride 7 parks rides. Like that could have been a big deal. But like they should have had like something with like, like dress code. Like the people at 7 parks won't let you wear like the skimpy like man bikini that like Chris Pontius is wearing. Or like the drug policy, like at 7 parks, you can't smoke there, but you can smoke at like Action Point, or like the drinking and whatnot, or there's just too many safety codes. And like, being that it takes place in like the 70s or the 80s or whatever, I mean, you can have a lot of stuff where like, maybe 7 parks, because they're the man, are like ultra conservative, which can translate to like anti-gay or like a little bit like racist or something like that. And then you can put the Action Point on like the right side of history in that, where because they're counterculture, they're siding with people of all different walks of life, and like that would make it okay that like like they're not safe with their rides, but they're on the right side of like social issues and stuff like that. But all they can really do for 7 parks is be like, well, the son of the lawyer is blonde and he pushes people around, when there's a literal character in Action Point on like the good guy's side, quote unquote, whose whole character like thing is he just pushes people around.
Yeah.
And they're all bullies at like Action Point, so they're not really any different from anyone at like Seven Parks.
Yeah.
So like I don't know like how they couldn't not make more of a distinction between these two different sides of this, culture argument.
Right.
And it just seems like such an easy thing that they could have done. Like Seven Parks is the man, they're the counterculture.
Right.
It's not really that hard to like make that distinction.
Instead,
they don't even try. They don't even have a scene at Seven Parks.
Instead, they kind of just get bogged down by what are maybe just like anecdotal things where it's like, and one time somebody fell through the slide, and they'll be like, and that's a scene. And like, like it's just, or I don't even know. I just like, I kind of don't know how this idea comes about and gets all the way to this stage of making it.
And like, I don't know how they didn't, like, they made this movie, but they didn't have like scenes where like people are getting angry at Action Point for all like the accidents and stuff that are happening there. Like, I guess their idea is like the people that are there are okay with the idea of getting injured because they're all like the jackass people who are daredevils and thrill seekers, and they don't want to be, held down by like, because like I do kind of like in that like first Bad Grandpa scene where he's like, it was a different time back then. Like kids could just do things that were dumb because that's what kids do, and like you were allowed to make mistakes that could fuck up your life forever, but that's what's fun about them. And like that's kind of an endearing way to look at that,
right? Yeah.
But then like they don't approach any of it else like realistically. Like in a realistic world, like in the real world, like people died. So like even if we want to skirt around that, like how was the only scene that like a parent came and was like, what the fuck is going on here, is when a kid was like sitting on top of like a ice cream stand or whatever.
Yeah.
Like how was no parent being like, my kid just broke his fucking leg on the Alpine slide and you're like not like putting seatbelts or anything on here, you're just gonna let this all like continue happening? Like that's just, I don't know, that's weird.
It was.
It's like a real big like oversight in this movie, and I don't know, I see the potential of this movie, and I think that's why I'm so taking it maybe a little bit easier than I should on this. But there are some like real just fucked up points of this movie that are like, it's just bad filmmaking. Like even though like I like the potential and the idea of this plot arc between Boogie and DC in terms of like you weren't really expecting like a nice father-daughter story from this, and I think it was kind of a nice surprise that it was sort of starting to turn out that way. But then they don't handle that really too properly either, like the points I've mentioned in terms of not really explaining the divorce, not getting to meet the mother. Like, even if you were going to like slightly villainize her a little bit in terms of being with the man, and he's the anti-man. But like the one conflict that they have is like this Clash concert that she's so obsessed with, and he keeps promising to take her to. But like if he's going to be like this anti-businessman that he is, where he's just kind of like winging things and he just wants to have this park. But then when he misses the concert, it's because he's poring over paperwork. Yeah. And it's very out of character for him. Like, like you can have him miss the concert. I think that's a fine plot point. But why is he not like working on a ride or like doing just dumb things with his friends because he's like
stealing shit?
Yeah, because he's like afraid to grow up, and like it's just like it's a weird plot point to have him like, oh, I've got to sit here and like look at this paperwork for a while, and I can't like take you to the concert, and it's not very in character for him. And like you could have had a very interesting movie where like he is afraid to grow up, he's like anti the man, so like the way that he disappoints her is not by being the man, it's by being like too anti the man, and he's then like the sort of the turn from there is like there are some things about the man that are okay, like the man knows how to raise his daughter and be there for her and keep true to commitments that he makes to people that he cares about, and then like when she like runs away, like that could have been something that was like, it's just a weird plot point because again everything with him is like counterculture and anti the man, so like her running away should have been her running back to like the man. Like again, like we needed a scene in New York with the mother, so like my idea for that is like have her
most definitely
get all the way back to New York, and she takes like a boring summer job like at some like paper pushing place, and he comes back and that's his thing is like, what, you're not going to work here all summer, like it's the summer, you should be like skinning your knees and like skinny dipping and like just doing like crazy stuff that we did as kids, and that could be his kind of like plea to get her to come back. But they don't go anywhere near that. She goes to like an ice cream shop, and they have that so weird scene with the bus that's like a non-starter where she's not even on the bus, and they just kind of out of nowhere are like, was she on the bus? oh, I know where she is. With no like train of thought to like lead us there. And then like it also doesn't make sense in terms of like the bad grandpa like present day scenes where like the Boogie character, the mother, and in those scenes she's like straight laced.
They like villainize adult.
She's like stuck up and straight laced there, and I don't know where that turn happens.
Yeah, because
again, like in the end of the movie, they smooth things over. Like he fucks up, and then he ends up finding her and apologizing, and then he makes up in the terms of I'll come back and visit you in New York. But there's nothing about it that's like her becoming straight laced would have been like, oh, I had a really horrible time this summer in Action Point.
Yes,
but she seems to have a positive time most of the time. So I feel like there's something missing on the editing floor, or just in the train of thought that these
or just in the brains of this. No, it just literally doesn't make sense. I don't know. It's just kind of like I don't know. I didn't like any of the narrative really at all. It was almost just kind of like it's kind of like a narrative in a porno movie. It's just kind of like instead of fucking, it's just like stunts, kind of. And it was just to fill out the time in between and kind of like loosely write this story that like surrounds what people really came for, So
I don't know. I feel like the stakes were so low, and my expectations were so low for this movie that like I didn't hate it. Like I didn't hate being here. I didn't particularly enjoy it. Like if I had paid for this, I'd be mad, but I didn't pay for it. I just used my movie pass card and got in, and it wasn't that long. It was pretty quick in and out, and I don't know. It's not the worst thing I've seen this year. It's not the worst thing I've seen in a long time, but it's definitely very flawed. It's definitely very bad. It's definitely very below average. For a movie. I would never recommend anyone go see it. But in like a year or two, if it's like on Netflix and you're like really, really bored and you just want to see some dumb stunts and like a kind of weird scenario. Yeah,
if you're like inebriated in some way or something, like
it feels like it's like a lazy day movie, or like a sleepover movie or something like that. And there was something about it that was kind of like I did kind of like the summer vibe to it. Like I don't know, it might have been just the day that I saw it, but it was like really nice weather, and I was like, it smelled like summer again. And then you see this kind of summer movie where like even like the emotional climax, quote unquote, like it's not too sad. You're not really having to devote any emotional energy to it. It's just moving stuff happening on screen to watch. And that sounds like I'm going to give it a really high score. I'm not. I'm going to tear this movie apart. My score is a bad movie. But I just feel like let me read the Rotten Tomatoes.
Go for it.
I don't think they even have a synopsis or a summary because I don't think enough people have reviewed it yet. I'm actually going to look on Rotten Tomatoes right now just to see if that shows up. 1 second. Rotten Tomatoes, Action Point. Oh, the score actually went up since last time I saw it. Yeah, no critical consensus yet. But it's at 19%, an average rating out of 3.6 out of 10, 26 reviews counted. So people aren't even really reviewing this, much less seeing it. I'm assuming Solo was supposed to be top of the box office this weekend.
Yeah.
Again. But this was like of the new movies coming out. I think this is supposed to be tops. And
it's a really weak, I mean, like we talked about that on the live episodes. It's a really weak movie selection just because we're so dominated at this point. Like there's not theaters or production companies aren't putting out, or studios aren't putting out like a lot of movies because I think last year was bad. So they're kind of just putting their very few eggs kind of in this summer basket. So it is just almost entirely Deadpool 2, Infinity War, and Solo in theaters right now. And, there's like two very small movies that are fighting for the scraps, which is this one and Upgrade, I think. So.
And apparently there's a movie called Adrift, because when I was texting my mom, she's like, oh, we saw Adrift. And I was like, I didn't know that was even a thing.
Oh, is that like yeah, it's like Shailene Woodley. And
it opened this weekend, I think, yeah.
And, yeah. I wonder. Yeah, let me look up the box office and see what this week was like for this opening.
And American Animals came out this weekend too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't think it had
limited
I
opening.
don't think it had a very wide release. No.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. So Adrift opened at number 3. Upgrade opened at number 6, and Action Point opened at number 9. Action Point.
What was number 2?
Just movies that are already out. Deadpool.
Oh wow! All right, so we totally, I totally misread. I mean, I think everyone was predicting Action Point would be top of the box office for new releases.
Right.
This week, I haven't even seen any trailers for Adrift at all.
I
saw one trailer for American Animals, and I did see a bunch for Upgrade, but I thought that there was no star power, so I didn't think it would do very well.
Yeah, I actually saw a lot of or maybe not. I don't know. I didn't see that much I'm familiar with the concept of what Adrift is. I think I've seen the trailer at least once in theaters, and probably. So yeah.
Anyway, I guess we can get into some ratings for
let's do it.
Action Point. I think I've kind of spoken my piece just in terms of overall. It's the most positive meh I think I can give to a movie. Like it's a bad movie, but it kind of just doesn't matter. Like it didn't need to be good. It knew exactly what it was doing. I think it did it. You know, I don't think Johnny Knoxville puts out a movie like this and is like, oh, it's like gonna be like the greatest thing ever. And like they wanted to make a movie that was fun for them to make and to do some stunts again, and they tried the concept.
There's a vehicle for
stunts in a fiction movie, you know, besides Bad Grandpa, which I guess had some weird semblance of a plot in there, while also being their like prank movie. I think I'm going to give it 1.5. It's not the worst movie I've seen this year. Like I think like Ready Player One, I gave a 2, and that's better than this. I think like Blockers is like slightly better just because I laughed more in Blockers. But I think like, you know, obviously A Wrinkle in Time was way worse than this.
Oh yeah.
I think Rampage was worse than this because it tried for more and fell more on its face, and this is just kind of comfortably what it is, and that's fine. And you know, nobody should go see it unless it's on Netflix. But yeah, 1.5.
All right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 1. I feel like I've laid it out. Yeah, again, I think this is just like a vehicle for the stunts. And I did. I mean, I enjoyed the stunts. And I mean, maybe the other half of the finger is for the things surrounding the stunts that I enjoyed. But it feels weird to give it anything more than that. I just remember watching it being like, oh boy. Or just like, I really like, it took me a long time to convince. I wasn't even in the mood to see like Solo opening night. So it took me like up until yesterday to like make myself go to the theater and watch this. And maybe the other half of that point comes from like, I was never like bored and wanted to leave the theater. Like it's not that level of bad. Like that Wrinkle of Time was definitely that. But it is just...
It never felt painful, I think, is the thing.
Right.
For me, at least.
It was, yes. And I think that's what made it like a step above, like a half step above that. And that's just where I'm coming from. Yeah. And I think maybe some reduction goes in there just for just the weird uncomfortableness that I felt during this movie. Yeah, it's just weird and it's random, and yeah, I don't know. That's that.
Yeah, like there's stuff in terms of like the vibe that I feel like is cringy in this movie, but there wasn't a lot of like specific lines where I was like, what were they thinking writing a line like that, you know? Like it's just kind of like I'm saying, like I feel like they didn't risk much, so they didn't gain much, you know? Like it was just kind of, let's just put it out there.
Yeah, and it is.
I don't think they expected it to open 9th at the box office, though.
Yeah.
So they didn't try much, and maybe they're going to lose much.
Yeah. Well, the budget was only $19 million, but they are not making that back.
I think they were expecting to make like $10 million maybe this weekend.
Yeah. Ooh. And they made $2 million.
I think like there were some like positive estimates that were like they could make like $17 million this weekend.
Oh, jeez.
But I don't think those the ones that I was reading didn't even count Adrift. in there. And I don't think they were counting Upgrade either. I forget what the other movie that opened, American Animals, they were counting on.
Right. That opened in 4 theaters, though, I think. American Animals.
Yeah, so maybe that was looking too far in advance and they didn't know the theater ratings, or the theater amounts, rather. But anyway, if you agree or disagree, if you even saw this movie, or if you're listening 2 years from now when it's on Netflix or one of those streaming sites, you can leave a comment below on our SoundCloud or YouTube, or you can hit us up on Twitter or Facebook, anywhere you want to get in contact with us. Or you can go to our Facebook group. How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The Facebook group. We have a post there now, open for reviews, discussion, and thoughts on this and Solo, a Star Wars story, which we reviewed last week. So go check that out. And pretty much anything else you can find at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. And I think that's about all we have for this week, unless I'm mistaken. Oh, we never talked about, I'm sure you'll talk about it in the intro, but just to touch on it again, we are going to be performing at the Philadelphia Podcast Festival for the second year in a row. We're going to be June 24th, which is a Sunday, at 4 p.m. at the Philadelphia Improv Theater, FIT, P-H-I-T. We'll have more details, hopefully, that we can post on our Facebook by the time this episode comes out, in terms of the other groups that we'll be performing with, and a full schedule for that day. So definitely come check it out. Come check out some of the other podcasts. We'll be doing some giveaways and some audience participation, and it'll be a really fun time. And if you can't make it, if you don't live in the area, we'll obviously post the recording as soon as we can get that too.
All right. It's going to be a good time.
Check that out. We'll see you guys next week for probably Ocean's 8?
We'll see. Ocean's 8, Hereditary, Incredibles 2. We're doing them all.
One of those movies will be next week.
Join us for
all of them in the next 3 weeks, so check them all out. We'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.
Bye.